Hi everybody, my name's Dave, this is Lucy. We both work for this company, Cartographer. We're quite a small software development house, and we build software for environmental groups, as Kingsley said, with a focus on working with rivers and water, because that tends to be where our customer base is. So we're here to talk about the challenges facing the environmental sector, and the ways in which software can help with those things. And we're going to split the talk into two halves, classic double presenter style. Lucy's going to talk about her area of expertise, which is the environment side of things, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about software. So,
okay, thanks, Dave. Yeah, I'm going to set it up, and he's going to follow through. So, to make sure we get everything working in sync. Great. Okay. So, thank you. Hi, I'm Lucy. As well as working for Cartographer with Dave, I also work for a small environmental charity based in London called Thames 21, and they specialise on cleaning up the watercourses. They started on the Thames foreshore about 20 years ago. They educate and engage and improve local river environments, working not just on the main Thames but also the incoming tributaries. So my specialism is in water and aquatic environments. Okay, sorry, Thames 21, thank you.
That's it.
Classic double act.
Now my computer's crashed. Okay, so go. You're ad-libbing now,
Cool. Here we go. Right in the real world. Here we are. So basically I want to bring it to the theme of one of the secondary theme of the conference, or perhaps the parallel theme of the conference, which is about packaging and plastics, which we're all, getting to be more and more familiar with this theme, and think about our future environment. Water is all around us. It connects us. It goes through us. We're made up of it to a large extent. But the question is how much we think about how our daily lives actually impact upon the water environment. And a lot of it depends on our field of vision, the scale of the focus, and thinking about what we're actually going to be having an impact upon. So we've become increasingly aware of plastics in our environment through a lot of great programs that we've been seeing on the TV. Thanks to David Attenborough, we're in the Attenborough room today. He's done an amazing job of making everybody care about plastics. But it's not just in oceans far away, it's also on our doorsteps. But literally, it's out there, we're maybe not aware of it, we're not really seeing it. It's out of sight and out of mind to a large extent. This is the River Brent in North London, where I work with a lot of really enthusiastic volunteers to clean up sites like this. I want to sort of kind of raise the point that, water comes through our environment, how we treat all this sort of plastic packaging. We don't think about how it actually ends up moving through the environment and getting out into the water, through the water network. And it's all a lot to do with our consumerist society, obviously. The byproduct of our convenience are these single-use plastic items, and, it's how we deal with the waste that's generated that becomes a long-term problem.
Do that one. I need this one.
So it's not plastic in itself that's the problem. It's more the nature of plastics. And there's two big issues here. First of all, plastics persist in our environment. They don't biodegrade like natural materials do. And when they do break down, they're not enriching the environment like natural materials are. Larger plastics are actually getting now embedded within our landscape, changing the shape of our environment even as they become part of the fabric. The other problem is that plastics do degrade, but they don't break down into the nutrients of life. They actually turn into smaller fragments and into microplastics. And, in some cases they may be more toxic, or they may be inert, but we're aware that they're getting into the food chains. Here again, another North London river. You'll probably get used to this with me. Our heron knows that his next meal will be sitting underneath that conveniently placed shopping trolley. This is like artificial habitat. You've heard of artificial reefs out at sea. Well, in urban rivers, we have shopping trolleys as artificial habitat. It's not the ideal scenario, but the heron knows that the little fish will be hiding under there. What he doesn't know is that fish has probably been consuming some of the broken down plastics from the previous slide. So we know it's out there, we know it's an issue, we know that it's more and more of it in our environment. So what? What are we going to do about it? What can we do? And most importantly, how can IT and software help? This is the the big issue? Well, the quick answer is monitoring. Monitoring is a really, really important aspect of the work that we do, environmental scientists. For positive change, we need evidence. We need to be able to record and analyse data about where the problems are, the extent of it, how serious it is, how things are moving around or not. We need to raise awareness through having that data. We need to identify solutions based upon sound evidence. And then when we go in and we apply a solution, we need to see if it's worked. So gathering that data is really important. But the big problem, as I just mentioned earlier, is that often the problems are hidden away, out of sight. And the question is, where do we begin? Where is this evidence, and what kind of evidence do we need? As an environmental scientist, my first inclination is to want to go out and get primary data. It's really important to have that from the bottom up, the information about where things are, especially if people are not spotting it out there. And the good news is that there's lots of opportunities for more and more people to be able to do that, not just the environmental scientists, but also citizen scientists. And this is where the technology can really help us out. So primary data basically fulfills our need to be able to record. We need to store that data. What we then need to do is be able to validate data, quality assure it, make sure that we've got consistency, standardized data that we can gather now and compare to data that were collected previously. And then when we've got that data and we're happy with it, we want to be able to analyze it and report upon it, hopefully to bring about some positive change. The really other important data is secondary data. And this is data made available by other people. It may be published research, or it may just be this open source data, which is fantastic now. We've got this amazing amount of open source data that's available out there. For example, this historic mapping site, which you can access freely. It's provided by the National Library of Scotland, and you can very quickly get a side-by-side window up where you can see changes in land use. So on the left, we have a map from the turn of the century, and this is a current aerial view of North London again. And obviously you can see the change in land use is dramatic, and you can imagine the effect upon the water cycle, water moving through our environment with these sorts of changes on the land in the upper part of the catchment does have a really dramatic effect on how water moves through that system. So the technology advances are providing us with fantastic information about all sorts of context, historical, and also bigger spatial areas. And it's really important that we put our primary data in the context of this history and of the bigger picture. Sometimes information will be provided in a very accessible way, like this site. Other times, open source data is quite difficult to get into. You need special software, or you need to be able to interpret it. And again, that's another thing which IT can really help to do, to help to analyse that raw data. So the key to working with all these sources is to be able to, first of all, discover and access what's out there, and then to be able to aggregate that data with the primary sources, and then for us to be able to publish that data for other people to access. All of this are areas where technology really serves a fantastically important role. Because sharing that data with other people is really important. It's all about partnership, right? We need to work together, as some of our previous talks have highlighted. The nature of partnerships are that they can be really difficult, as we've heard about in the consensus talk earlier. People come with different perspectives, different amounts of knowledge, different viewpoints, even different language to talk about the same thing. So how we work together, how we build those partnerships to support better environments for nature and to support us as people as well is really, really important, because having those diverse partnerships is also incredibly enriching. And it brings different people to the table with different interests, different opportunities to create more benefits for people through a better environment. So all of these things are really important, but they create some of these issues which are quite complex in how you need to communicate. So establishing partnerships to work for nature allows us to be collaborative, engage with wider interests, and to be inclusive. Particularly to identify the common ground between people coming from different backgrounds. Anyway, who's doing all of this? Who's out there working at it? Well, there's more and more opportunities for us to get involved. It is catching on. If you're up in London and looking for something to do, Thames 21 will provide you with an opportunity to go out and have fun like these good people, practically picking litter up. More and more we have opportunities as well to survey that litter, to gather the data. And having that data allows organisations like Thames 21, Marine Conservation Society and others, and numerous others, to build the case, to be able to lobby and influence policy and bring about change. It's a really important contribution that people can make, because unfortunately, with all the funding cuts, it's often the monitoring which gets cut. This is what we're seeing across the whole sector. Organisations will generally look to the statutory minimum for what they need to do to protect the environment. So the role that volunteers are playing, that citizen scientists are playing, is vitally important, and having that accessible technology is key to doing that. And it's not only people having an interest at the local level that's important, because what is important is then being able to scale it up to a national picture and even use these data internationally, but particularly where we've got public bodies at the national level scaling back on their monitoring. Citizen science is being recognised as an opportunity to fill in those gaps, to gather data, to compare spatially and temporally, and build those data sets, build that evidence. And it's helping to shape the decisions that are being made that are going to affect our future environment. So, you know, we can't really understate the importance of it. Oh, interesting. So just to sum up, really, basically now we've talked a lot about all the different issues. There are some trends emerging, and there's a lot of challenges as well. The emerging trends are, that's my fault, that collaboration is really, really important. We need to work together, we need to work in partnership, and citizen science is one of the keys to being able to influence for positive change through the data that we're able to gather more abundantly than will be provided for by other resourced opportunities. The challenges are that it's very complex, the data sources are numerous, and bringing them all together is a challenge. We have to be able to work through that. It does take time. Austerity is making cuts all left, right and centre, so there's limited other opportunities. And what's important is that we work efficiently with all of this information and together, because time is limited. I think it was a fantastic introduction talking about that issue of time, because it's really, really important. You know, we've got all these distractions, everything takes a lot of time, and I think IT can really help us to make the best of that time. So I'm going to stop now, I've probably gone over time, and hand over to Dave. Thank you.
I think we're bang on time, actually, which is the first. So these are the kind of issues that we face in this sector. And as Lucy has sort of said a few times, software can really help with this. It's these kind of apps that help us collaborate and work together and share information, and you know, that will really help out. So I want to give you some examples of that. I'm going to pick just one example, although this is a big space with all sorts of bits of software. I'm going to look at collecting data, and we're going to look at some of the tools that are available to small NGOs working in the environment, and sort of I want to show how it raises some issues for software developers and how we might proceed. So let's say we are building a litter monitoring and litter collection program, and we want to design some software to collect the data and manage it. There are a few different ways that we can do this. The first one is we can hire a bunch of developers and go ahead and build our own custom app. Lots of catchment partnerships and small NGOs do this. You know, they'll build a web app. We'll have a few different survey forms on it, and we'll collect all the data together. It's very, very tempting, especially when grant money is available for IT development, so you can get a few £1,000s and hire this fantastic team here to do the work for you. Now, there are lots of pros to building your own software. It does do exactly what you want it to do, so you'll get all the survey forms to collect all of your data. It allows you to really focus on your volunteers and citizen scientists and help sort of encourage them by showing them the change that they're making. But the dangers of building software yourself in this space is that there is a lot to take into account. And that means that software development can be expensive. And a lot of people overlook the ongoing costs, support costs and maintenance costs, keeping the lights on, having somebody on call in case it breaks, and the cost to your organisation if something goes wrong. And then there's this risk of siloing of data. So has anyone heard this term before, siloing? Okay, so basically we're talking about sharing and secondary sources being really important. And as funding becomes more scarce and as we're forced to work together as a big sort of network of small companies, and the ability to use each other's data is almost essential these days. And if we have our own software, we need to make sure we're providing that data in standard formats. And the first thing to get cut probably is going to be the exports that send data to other people, because that's not our primary focus. We're worried about ourselves. So you want to be a little bit careful of that kind of thing. Now, bespoke software development is the kind of thing that we do at Cartographer. I'll just mention it quickly. We are basically a software development team, and we do build apps and websites for people. But and so this is one of them. This is a litter monitoring app. And what we try and do is we have a shared platform. So the idea is that we're trying to spread the cost of doing these things like sharing data between all of our customers. And, oh, that's exciting. I wonder why I picked that one. A nice looking map, I guess, is the idea. But there are other options available as well, and I want to sort of highlight them much more than what we do. So the first thing is we could pick some off-the-shelf apps. And actually, in the world of citizen science, this is becoming quite a common pattern, because there is money available for software development, and some of that money is available at a sort of a wider scale. Companies can larger groups like the Environment Agency and Natural England and people like this can hire companies to build off-the-shelf apps. So here's a great example in the world of litter. It's an app called Marine Litter Watch, and this is something that was funded by the European Environment Agency. So it's wider even than national. It's an international thing, and it's just an app you can get off the Google Play or Apple App Store. So you can get this app, you can give it to all your volunteers, they can create logins, and then you can organise maybe some litter cleanups and get people along, and they fill in, a pretty easy survey here on the right. You can scroll down this list of items, record how many shopping bags you collected, how many pieces of plastic. And the idea of this is it's very easy to collect this data, but the data all flows into a shared database. So this at the European level. You can even browse it here inside the app. Some simple visualizations here of where people have been doing cleanups. You can, break down the litter by the key offenders here. So cigarette butts is obviously by counts the thing that people collect most off beaches. And that information helps volunteers understand, well, we did this survey here, this cleanup here, and this is one of, a few hundred. We're making a difference here. And further to that, when it comes to applying for funding and lobbying, you have information there yourself. So this is a website. You can get to it without authentication. You can take the data collected by this app and break it down and download it and use it for further use. So this kind of app is really, really important. And we see this in a lot of areas. I've picked one other company that I happen to know. It's a company called Natural Aptitude. And they basically have a business model where they've set up some tech to build small, simple mobile apps that collect data into shared databases. And this is what they do. So this is a group of their things, their apps, mostly for species monitoring, invasive plants, hedgehogs, bees, this kind of thing. So this is a really, really good pattern. Now, as an NGO, this is a really great choice. It's a really great choice because it's free. Right? These apps have all been paid for up front, so you can easily roll them out to your volunteers. And they're great for these specific use cases. However, there is a problem that actually lots of different organisations have different workflows that they need to support, and they have different data that they need to collect. Not everybody is simply collecting the data that's sort of the lowest common denominator spread across the country. So if you want to actually customise this stuff, maybe add in a field, then you're kind of out of luck, right? The app does what it wants. The data will go somewhere useful, and then you can get it back, but it's a very rigid kind of setup. So the question might be, is there a middle ground? Is there sort of a do-it-yourself option that doesn't involve hiring teams of developers? Lots of people use things like SurveyMonkey. and Google Forms, right, to collect data. You just build a form. And in fact, that approach has been applied to the environment as well. So here are some really interesting tools. This is a tool called EpiCollect. It's coded by some people at Imperial College, and it's funded by the Wellcome Trust. It's a scientific data collection version of SurveyMonkey. So you can go to a website, create a login, and build a form by dragging these things from the left into the center here. Start to put together a kind of a survey structure, and then from there, you get a mobile app for free. So this will allow your volunteers to step through question by question, filling things out. It's very simple, but it's quite flexible. And this is a sort of a public sector kind of funded project. There's also commercial projects. So this Survey 123 is made by Esri, who are like the Adobe of geographical information systems, if you like. They make ArcGIS, the sort of the big commercial GIS product. But it's a similar principle, right? We've got some fields on the right, we drag them onto a form, and we get a mobile app back out. And there's like a QR code publishing system. You can get people to add this to their mobile phones and do surveys relatively easily. So there are actually a lot of these free or low-cost solutions out there for NGOs. Oh, 5 minutes, yikes. And you can get a bit of customizability back out of that. The problem we then come to, from a sharing point of view, is standardization. And this is where I'm going to have to talk offline. I have some ideas, but this is a really interesting space. There's no guarantee that you're collecting litter with your litter survey in the same way that other people around the country are collecting litter with their litter surveys. Litter is really important, actually, because there's so many ways of dividing up, what types of thing did you collect? Is it just plastics, or is it plastic bags and plastic cups and so on? And so working with other people and, what's the word I'm looking for? Integrating with other people and discovering what other people are doing becomes a big problem. So there's data sets like this that we've been collecting. There's a challenge of how do we discover those, and you're starting to see things like, the data.gov.uk is a really cool platform with loads of data sets on it, and there are many, many other similar platforms. But also, we need discovery of tools. We need to find out what other people are doing, what is considered best practices, and how we can conform with those things. And really, the only solution I can see for that so far is support networks. So these guys, a catchment-based approach website, they're a part of the Rivers Trust. So we work a lot in rivers, and this is a group that is specifically designed to give advice on tooling and data collection and to publish information about what tools are available. So looking forwards, I want to say a few sort of general words, aspirational words about software development. Where do we see this going? Well, I'd like to see movement towards a software ecosystem here. So you can imagine I've got my mobile app, I'm collecting data and publishing it to my website. Maybe I want to put it into a shared database, and maybe you're doing something similar with your web app and you're making an infographic, but we want to be able to share that data. What do we need to be able to enable this kind of stuff? Well, we need interoperability. For that, we need to have, say, standard data formats. These data formats all exist when it comes to geospatial data. So if we've published our data, we can easily build visualizations of that data. But these are a few examples of visualizations, but to share the surveys, to be able to share our data input, we need metadata, which I think it becomes much more interesting. We need to know what data sets exist, and more importantly, what surveys exist. What do they record? What are considered good errors in this data? What are the techniques used to record this stuff? And that way, if we've got different apps that maybe don't quite match up, then we can sort of automate the process. We can build little building blocks to convert from one data source to another. I think that's really interesting work. That there's plenty of it out there, and what we need for that is an infrastructure which we can all hook into. I'd also like to see this go into the tooling, actually. We saw earlier a survey builder where we're dragging fields onto a survey form and allowing non-technical users to customize data collection. Well, can we apply the same principles of standardization and metadata to the tooling level? So if I'm building this survey form, why can't I get a little bit of help? Hey, it looks like you're recording some water quality. Would you like to maybe add some fields about the cloudiness of the water, or go to the CABA website to find out what other people are doing, or maybe publish this automatically to a shared data set. I'd like to see that kind of stuff built into these builder tools, and it's only with some kind of common interchange that we can do that. So we've got a lot of work to do around metadata, sort of recovering metadata maybe from existing surveys or type checking surveys maybe, and about creating workflows where data flows between components of a system. And just some companies that I think are doing really interesting work in the sort of marketing space. Maybe we can steal some of their ideas for this space. So, last 3 slides. We've talked about some environmental challenges, some challenges in the sector, the complexity and having to do more with less all the time. We've talked about the challenges of the software. So there's this real trade-off between building flexible software that allows you to collect different types of data and having standard software that is interoperable. And we need to be able to solve that stuff some way and discover new surveys. And we've talked about opportunities, or things that I think personally were really interesting to work on, especially in an open source context. If you work in the environment, does anyone here work in the environment? Have we got any people from NGOs in the environment here? Okay, well, I was going to say, keep up the good work and think about sharing data first. If you're a volunteer, does anyone volunteer for an environmental group or for any charity groups here? We've got a whole bunch of people. Definitely look into that tooling stuff and see if you can help people set up apps and share data. Really important. And if you're a developer, maybe consider volunteering for a local NGO, or maybe help them configure an app or something, or get into this space. I think there's actually a lot of really interesting open source developments and a lot of really interesting commercial opportunities for developers in this space. And hopefully together, between all of us, we can help make our environment a little bit better, a little bit nicer to live in. So thank you very much.